Hey everybody, Karaoke here. The theme of this week's dungeon training guide is preparing for your first dungeon. And to do that, one of the first things you're going to need is a good build for your character. Now, as you've been leveling, you might have been playing around with different builds or maybe, fiddling with this or that. But dungeons and fractals present a very specific set of encounters, and we've been doing this for 3 years. We know how to beat these, we know how to beat these well, and so there are people out there who are making a bunch of really great build guides that you should absolutely try to start with as you do dungeons. Now, I'm okay with people over time saying, hey, I like doing this little thing a little bit differently and better, but my recommendation for starting with dungeons is to get one of the builds that we know works and we know works well. And especially if you're going to be using things like LFG, there is usually an expectation that you'll be running certain builds or performing certain roles inside of the dungeon. Now, you absolutely can just say, come to YouTube and search for Guild Wars 2 build guide, but the things you see here may not be incredibly useful or may not be part of what people are expecting. So, for example, Wooden Potatoes' Elementalist Burn Guide is the top result for me. This is not something you'd want to be running in dungeons, and some of these are just old. You can see a lot of these videos are, 2 years old. Well, guess what? That guide is really outdated at this point. Now, instead, I'm going to suggest a particular site for you to go to. This is MetaBattle. MetaBattle is a site where people will compile build guides and different information for different game modes and classes. Usually what you want to do is come into the Buy Game Mode section here. And then it doesn't say dungeons, it says fractals, but you want to go into the fractal guides, and these will have different builds for the different professions. Now, the first thing to worry about here is that just about all of these use elite specs that are locked behind Heart of Thorns, and in the future with future expansions, I'm sure it'll be the same thing. If you are not caught up on the most current expansion, you may not be able to run these different builds. Now, the best ones here, the meta ones, are the ones that you should be running if you can. But otherwise, there are other builds that are available here that you may be able to run. In a lot of the videos that you'll see me doing, I'm on an alt account that doesn't have Heart of Thorns, and so I'm running kind of a Guardian build here that isn't one of the main ones, but is still an alright build to run. Now, each of these different builds, if you click in on it, it's going to have information like the weapons that you need. So for this one, I need a greatsword and an axe mace. It'll show you the utility skills you should run. And then there's also going to be some suggestions for other things you might be able to do. Now, we're going to talk more about different gear options that we have and different equipment that we can put on, because a lot of these things, if I were going and trying to get the things that it's telling me to get here, these sigils are 6 gold a piece, or these runes, so that's going to be 36 gold right there. You may not have 36 gold to start to buy all of those, plus 8 gold here for the Sigil of Force and the Sigil of Knights, a few gold. Getting all this stuff may be out of your price range to begin with. So in addition to what you see on MetaBattle, on this guide in the next few videos, we'll talk about some cheap alternatives for a lot of this. But you'll see if you look through this entire guide, there's a lot of good information about how to play the class, what traits you should be using, and reading through this is going to help you a lot as you get started with your dungeon experience. So your homework, if we want to call it that, is to make sure that you've done a few things here before you go any further in this video series. Make sure you are leveled to 80. Make sure you have all of your skills unlocked, including your elite spec if you're running Heart of Thorns. And make sure you have at least probably about 10 to 15 gold ready to get started gearing. Once you've done all those things, you can go ahead and continue in this video series. Use the playlist that should be shown up at the top right to jump to future videos. We'll talk about a little bit more of the gearing you can do. Just make sure to use the guides on MetaBattle to help you figure out which weapons you're going to need and what an optimal scenario might look like. The next video in this series will talk about the very minimum gear you're going to need to participate in dungeons and how you can get it for relatively cheap. I'll see you guys there.